Well, I've noticed something as you go in churches. I was thinking about this through this week, that we'll say sometimes in churches that maybe for effect that it's 100% that we're all going to die. You know, I know that's, I guess that's a pretty normal thing, but we say like the 100%, like we're all going to die. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, whatever we say, like everybody's going to die. Except for these two guys, you know, in the Bible. I always think about that. I'm like, maybe it's just me as a pastor. I'm like, yeah, so really the number is like 99.999998 or something, whatever the number would be. It's 100% except for these two guys. You know, we're going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about one of them. Elijah is one of these guys we see in the Bible. Now, this, I don't know if you've read this or maybe you're skeptical of it or not, but there's a guy Elijah and there's a guy Enoch that we see in the Bible that it says they didn't die. They just were taken up to heaven. It's a crazy thing. It's not normal. You don't see that all the time. You don't just see like we're in here like we had it full in here, and then some people just went up to heaven or something that way. If you're wondering that way, no, it's not normal at all. Really type of thing in there. So I want to look at that. We're going to talk about Enoch here today. But what we've been doing, if you haven't been with us, you can go online now. Now I can say this. I can say you can go back and see some of our old messages if you want to. But they're on there. You can follow along with what we've been doing last 2 weeks. The first week we started out, we went into, it was Jesus coming in, and it's in Luke chapter 14, giving this really strong message to some people. It was like people came up there, and I said, this is an extreme picture. There was people coming in, and they were following him. They wanted to hear from him, and instead of turning around and giving them kind of a shallow, simple message, because I want them to come back next week, he gives them this very bold message. All of them are coming, and he's like, if you want to follow me, if you want to be my disciples, you got to take up your cross. Follow me. He said extreme things like you got to die to yourselves. He went on, we read some other passages where he said, if you don't hate your father, mother, sister, brother more than me, you're not worthy to be my disciple. I mean, he said bold things in that way. Where crowds were coming around, they wanted to be there. They wanted to hear what this guy was having to say because they've heard these stories of him healing people and doing miraculous things that nobody could do. So he was drawing a crowd, and he said these bold things that it pushed some people away. They were like, that's pretty cool what he's doing. This is amazing. Nobody's done this before. But I don't like what he's saying. He's asking everything. That's what he was saying. He said, I'm asking everything from you guys. What I said last week, it was Jesus said, I'm here, but your family's here. I'm here, your mom is here. I'm here, your cute kids are here. I'm number one. He's greater than everything. That's what he was saying. He's not like the greatest thing since sliced bread or whatever you want to say. He is it. He's trying to say, I am number one, and that's how it has to be in our life. He's got to be number one in every possible way. So he's asking for complete, just laying at his feet. He is the Lord of our life. He is everything. So that's what he was saying. And it was tough for some people to get. It's tough for people to get today. And sometimes we just go halfway in on that. And so that's what he's really talking about there. And so then we came into Hebrews chapter 11. And that's where we're going to be again today. But we were in Hebrews 11 last week. We jumped into it. And we see this. And I've heard an expression, if you've ever heard this. They say, if you rake, you find leaves. If you dig, you find diamonds. And I think that's a perfect expression for really reading in the Bible. And honestly, sometimes in the sermons, it's really, in a lot of ways, just raking because it's like a small amount of time up here. And I'm just kind of picking out some things. We may find some diamonds in there, whatever, in all the things that you say, Kyle, maybe we find a diamond or two in there, what you're talking about. But I encourage you, get in and read this book. I've been going through Hebrews and really the whole Bible, but just going through Hebrews and just get in there and see what all this is talking about with faith and trusting in God. It's just all throughout this book, and I hope you guys will get in there. We're just like I said, we're going to kind of rake through this, and we're just looking at Hebrews chapter 11 and what was happening here, and just the extreme boldness that he's asking from us, and the faith, and it's an active faith. It's not something that is just very shallow and just saying it with our words. It's following him with every possible thing that we have. And we see that we're going to look at some of these people that were from the Old Testament. So Jesus, as we see him when he came later on, they didn't really fully know about him, but they were looking forward to the Messiah, which is who Jesus is. They were looking forward to him. So their faith was in him. Their faith was trusting in the coming Messiah. So everything was pushing towards this, and we see that. So that's what they're doing, and you see their extreme faith and what they're doing there in their lives, and just how they were following him. And so here's what's happening here with Hebrews chapter, or just in the book of Hebrews, kind of catch you guys up, is I believe that they were Christians. It was Hebrew Christians. They were being either tempted or maybe they're just being tempted themselves or by somebody else to go back under the law. The Old Testament, we see the Old Covenant and we see the New Covenant. You know, Jesus came and he fulfilled the Old Covenant, okay? You see, in the Old Testament, if you know kind of a difference, it's like they sacrificed animals. It was very messy in different ways. They had a priest to kind of go into them, and he would go into the temple and sacrifice for them once a year for everybody's sins. And even the priest would have to get himself right before he could go into the temple. And then there was a section in the temple, it was like the Holy of Holies. Like that's where you would go to do these, you know, meeting God and doing these offerings, and just the holiest place. And I believe I've read where they would even tie ropes to them because people couldn't go in there. You couldn't just go in there. So if this priest went in there and he wasn't right with God, you know, he would just die. I mean, this was not a place like we could go. It wasn't just like you come into church and like it's up here and like I messed up a lot and surely he's going to be okay with it. No, you would go in there and they would just die. And so I believe I've read where they would like tie ropes to them. And if they died in there, like, well, who's going to go in there? I don't want to die. You know, you couldn't go get them. So it was like, let's pull them out. You know, this was a very extreme thing. So this was kind of in the Old Testament. And then you see everything was looking towards the New Testament with Jesus and him being the final once-for-all sacrifice for everybody. He was perfect in every way. He's the Son of God. He's divine. And so he became that once-for-all sacrifice, completely just fixing it all to where now we don't have to do these ongoing sacrifices which are imperfect. And so you see this in Hebrews, and it's just an amazing book as you go and you read throughout this. But some of these people were coming and they hear about Jesus, and I think they're tempted to go back, put themselves under the law and say, I get what Jesus is doing. This is grace. This is amazing, but we've always done it this way. We always did these sacrifices and how we live. And they were wanting to put themselves back under the law. And so he's writing to them, talking about Jesus is greater. And if I could give a theme of Hebrews, really, I think I would say that is that Jesus is greater than everything. And you see that throughout this book. So I want to read this. I'm going to get into Hebrews chapter 11 in a minute, but I want to read this verse right here. This is Hebrews chapter 10, just a chapter back, talking about this because I think this is important for us as a church, and we see what they were doing then. But look at this, Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. It said, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So you see he's writing to these people. He's writing to them. Evidently, I think some of them were maybe getting in the habit of, like it just wasn't a big deal for them to come together and worship and be together. It's a thing now, and I'm not just saying this like to get numbers. It's like this is what they were struggling with this. They were struggling with this idea of maybe kind of getting lazy in this way of coming together. And he's like, this is important for us to get together. And I've talked about this a lot when we come together. When we have these struggles, when you don't know something, we're all in different levels here in the church. I see that all the time. We ask questions. That's why I want you guys to do it. We come here as a church because we're to spur each other on. We're to learn. We're to grow. We're to bring in all our stuff in here and talk and be like, this was a tough week, or I don't understand what this is talking about, or what is this series we're talking about with this faith? What is this? What about these people? And we come together and we discuss this, and it's important. We should spur each other on. We should come together because you guys know our weeks are tough. You go to your jobs, you go to your homes, your neighborhoods, whatever it is that you're facing. Sometimes we don't all know that here, but when you leave, life gets tough. And it's extremely tough. And I don't think we're intended to do this alone. We're intended to be together, really as a family. And I always want to push that. And I always want us to see that. But that's what he's saying here, and that's what I see he's talking about. Like, stop doing this. We got to get together. We got to meet. We got to talk. We got to essentially become this very tight-knit group. You see pictures in the Bible, it's like we're being grafted into this kind of living organism. You know, you see like Jesus being the vine. He gives all these illustrations of him being the vine. You see the body, kind of pictures of that. I really like that one. It's like we're all in this, we're a body, and there's different parts. And you see that, and that makes a lot of sense how we're different, and we have different abilities, but we're together as one. You know, as one person hurts, we should all hurt. As one person turns 40, we all turn 40, right? Or something, whatever that is. When we're hurting, when we rejoice, we all rejoice, you know, in that way. It's like, it should be that way. And I think that's kind of the picture of what he's saying. I want my church to be this way. And so you see that in this book in here. And now we're discussing faith. As we looked at it last week, it's a required component to being a Christian. Very simple thing. We see that, and I think we describe it in many ways. Sometimes we don't fully understand, what it means, but it's an essential part of being a Christian and being a follower of Christ. And we're going to see a little bit more about that today. I don't know if you guys have done this. I was trying to think of a way, when we think about faith and we think about things that's hard to describe or reading the Bible, I get things wrong a whole lot. Especially the best thing I can think of is like with songs. And I may have said it before. It's been a while. You guys have sang the song. It was a while back. And I don't even remember the name of the song, but it's where it goes, the gift of freedom, gold can't buy. You know that song? It's one little part of it. The gift of freedom, gold can't buy. Melissa's laughing. She already knows where I'm going with it. Yeah. She's like, you can leave. I hate my dad. He's old. Anyway, we're taking all this, but I got the song wrong, and I always say it the wrong way. I was like, the gift of freedom, Coke and pie, and I would sing that, and it's actually golden. Now you know why Alyssa's like, I wish I had a different dad, but I would sing that. Have you ever been that when you're singing these songs, and you're there with somebody who knows the songs, and they start singing it, and you like just blare out the wrong words, and you say it, and then they say it, and all of a sudden your words come together, and now you're looking at each other like, what'd you say? And they're like, you? I'm like, oh, kind of come to that realization moment. I've done that so many times. A lot of Christian songs, I do that too, and I'm singing the wrong way, and I've learned it here. I'm glad we have the words up on the screen, because then my worship changes, and somebody was, there's a Jeremy Camp song, and this will be where I'll stop, because I get off on these rabbit trails. There's a Jeremy Camp song that I swore for a long time that he was saying shirtless when he was saying shameless. So, yeah, I don't know. There's things I just shouldn't say, I know, but we come together, we learn this. I think there's things when you come into the church, we get together, it's like you learn these things. We get together and it's like, this is what this means, and we push each other and we can learn more about it. I think we see that with faith. Here's a big issue that I mentioned that we're struggling with, and what they were struggling with. Are we supposed to be back under the law? Are we supposed to be? This is what these guys were struggling with. Is this what it's about? I think they're getting around to the people who were seeing this way, and now they're meeting with Christians, and they're not understanding the place of the law and all this, and they don't understand this. They don't understand Jesus and where he's at and where that fits in from their old lifestyle, and that's what's happening. And so, like I said, again, Hebrews is all about this. Look at this. He's greater. You see this throughout all the chapters. It talks about Jesus. It says he's greater than the Old Testament prophets in chapter 1. He's greater than the angels in chapter 1 and 2. He's greater than Moses in chapter 3. He's greater than Joshua in chapter 4. He's greater than the priests in chapter 5. And he talks about him going to the cross and dying and what he did. And everything that he did, the Old Testament was pointing towards him. Was all pointing to Jesus. Was all pointing to him, the Messiah. This is what they were having faith in. This is what they were trusting in. The long-awaited Messiah. And so he fulfilled all of that. So the Old Testament, we've talked about this in home groups before. I know we said that the Old Testament is not as if it was like a messed up plan of God's. It was there for God. It was purposefully pointing towards Jesus. And now Jesus comes and he's like, there was a place for that. It was pointing towards me, and I'm here. I have fulfilled all of this. And it's about me. And so you see that, just really the theme of Hebrews is like, Jesus is greater. He's greater than everything. He's greater than all of this. In fact, write this down. What Jesus did trumps everything. He trumps everything. He's greater than all that. I think that's the question that really he's putting out there. These people that they're wondering about him. He's above everything. He's trumping everything. Let me read this, kind of jumping around. Like I said, there's so many things in Hebrews that I'm going to have to go back later on and just go through this whole book. But look at Hebrews 8:6. Because they're asking questions here. And Hebrews 8:6, he says this. But in fact, the ministry Jesus has received is as superior to theirs as the covenant of which he is mediator is superior to the old one, since the new covenant is established on better promises. So it's all pointing to him. His law, it even talks about, you see this as you go through Hebrews, and it talks about his law is now in our minds. It's in our hearts. He's written it on us. It's not this outward thing that they're looking at. Now it's like, it's kind of different. Now we have the Spirit living inside of us, and it just gives us this more greater picture of God. So I love the picture of Hebrews, just really kind of how it's bringing us up to this picture of putting Jesus, he's the number one. He trumps everything in all this, and that's what they're kind of learning here as they go throughout all this. They struggle with this, though. They struggle with their ancestors and how it was, and they're just wondering the place of Jesus. Now let's go to Hebrews chapter 11, because this is what I want to get into. I want to get into really the faith part. We kind of like rake through, like I said, looking at some of the Old Testament and some of the things that they're going through, but I want to look at Hebrews chapter 11 now. We're just going to look at a couple of verses here, but look at verse 5. Hebrews 11:5. It says, by faith Enoch was taken from this life, so he did not experience death. I think that's pretty clear. He didn't die. He was taken straight to heaven. He could not be found because God had taken him away. I love how it just kind of goes on there. But before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. He was taken from this life. He just went off, and it just wasn't here anymore. I really just love the kind of picture of that. It's very unique. It's not something that's normal. Enoch and Elijah, that's all we really see throughout history. Now, you may have like some third cousin, like, well, my third cousin, I swear they just were taken off. I only see it here. These two guys, Enoch was taken off to heaven. What a crazy picture there. In fact, let me go back to Genesis 5. This is where it was first talked about, and I give a little bit more and we can see about this guy. Genesis 5:21. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God, then he was no more. I love the picture of that because God took him away. It's just a very strange picture. He was there, he walked faithfully with God, and then he was taken away. Now, again, I share too much probably about me, but I think when I first got into reading the Bible, I did. I go back, and I don't know if you guys know, but way in the Old Testament, you see this in Genesis, people lived a crazy amount of time. You know, like 40, this is nothing. This is like a kid, you know, like a very little kid, 40 years old. Like Methuselah, his kid there lived, as far as we know, the oldest, 969 years. I mean, this is a lot of years. Now, again, I thought I figured it out when I first got into this. I became a Christian at 19. And I think I started looking at this, and I seen these numbers, and I was like, this is weird. I got it figured out. I was in college too, and I was like, makes my college sound bad, but I was like, maybe there's just like, maybe it's like a decimal place. Maybe they just kind of missed it, you know? And just move it over, and that's what it is, 969, 96. That makes more sense, you know, and some of these, and I see some of these numbers, and they work, and you go down the list there, and you see some of them being this age, and it's like, that's good, until you get to some of them that are like, at 50 years of age, they had a kid, and then you're like, wait a minute, that decimal now, it doesn't really look right at 5 years of age, so no, I think I came to the conclusion that, no, these people, it just was different then. They lived these very long years. It was different. It was in the beginning. You see that going to just really the fall and how when they started, people were more pure. The line was more pure. Then you see like the Tower of Babel, like it really kind of starts going down there. See the numbers really kind of getting to what you see now. It just happened that way. I know that's a weird picture. That's one of those things like I think in the church we look at it and we're like, this is weird. I don't know if I want to talk about these numbers. That's strange to really understand how it happened. They do. They live longer years. So we see that with him. He lived many years. In fact, his 365 years is kind of small compared to some of these others. 365 years. He had a kid, and then for 300 years, it says he walked faithfully with God. I think for us today, it's I'm just trying to walk faithfully with him at all. 10 years, 20 years, the rest of my life. It's like he walked faithfully with him for 300 years. What a cool picture. It doesn't give you, we don't see a whole lot about that anymore about what he's saying there, but he walked faithfully with God for 300 years. What an amazing picture there. Maybe that's part of the reason like he was taken to God. It's like because he was faithfully there walking with God, and like maybe that was his reward. I'm not going to sit here and tell you today, God, like how to get out of this world like in 5 easy steps without dying. Like I don't know. Like this is God's plan. He does his things. I don't know that there, but I do want to look at what is it about Enoch. In fact, write this down if you're looking at what did Enoch do to please God? Because I think that's an important thing. If we're brutally honest, coming into the church, I mean, let's be real. When we come into church, when we want to know about God, just individually, I guarantee you, everybody here, you'd be like, your main question, if you're pressed and it's true, is how do I get to heaven? I mean, honestly, I got to think everybody's thinking that. You're not like, no, I just care about everybody else. That's a good thing. We should be that way. We should be selfless and wanting to help people. But I guarantee it's in our hearts. It's like, how do I get to God? Like if we remove the selfish, like just as if we're holy in some way. Kind of move that facade out of the way. That's what we're wanting to know. I don't ever hear people just being brutally honest in churches. In fact, this is where we come to church most of the time, and we put on our faces, and it's always, I don't know if you guys get this, but it's like, how you doing? Well, I'm good. You very rarely hear people when they come to you like, how are you doing? It's like, terrible. This week was horrible. I had diarrhea all week. They canceled Roseanne or whatever, your thing was. Like, everybody's, maybe that caused the two there. I don't know. But no, it seems like we kind of hold back on those things there. But let's look at that. If we're honest, I think that's the question we're wanting to know is what did Enoch do to please God? I want to get to heaven. And so that's what I want to look at today. I see this with Enoch here. Now, let's look at verse 6. Let's kind of go in there as we think about Enoch pleasing God. And what does that mean? Look at verse 6. Very important thing. Like if you're highlighting, I think this is a really good verse to memorize and highlight. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. What an important thing there. Very simple there, but without faith, it's impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. This is I'll put this up there, this is a very extremely simplistic statement there, but this is what we have to see. You have to believe God exists. Right? I didn't claim to be the smartest guy in the world. But that's what it is. You have to believe God exists. I know that seems very simple there, but that's important. That's a Captain Obvious statement right there. But you have to believe God exists. That's step number one right there. The only presupposition for really coming to know God is believing he exists. I mean, that's it. You got to come to that place right there. I'm not saying we're fully at the level of faith and trusting in him and moving mountains and all this type of stuff, but you got to come to that place right there. Anybody's going to follow Christ. You're going to be a Christian. You got to believe in the existence of God. I mean, you cannot go somewhere. You cannot go to some place if you don't even believe in the existence of that place. You know what I mean? I mean, just really simple things. You have to believe that God exists. That's number one right there. But let's go a little bit deeper right here. What's being implied here is you can't please God unless you have faith. And it says Enoch pleased God, so therefore Enoch had real faith. I mean, it's kind of simple if we break this down. He pleased God. You can't please God without faith. Enoch pleased God. He had faith. So what is it that it takes for us to please God? It's faith in him. It's trust in him. We talked about last week about faith, and what I said, it's more than just saying some words. It's more than just saying, I have faith. It's more than just saying, I believe in that. I read a passage from James 2 last week that said, the demons believe God exists, and they shudder, or they tremble with fear. So it's not enough to just kind of verbalize it, or even just have this conscious thought in your mind. It's a faith. It's a faith with substance. Something that's going to drive you to do something with action. Something that's going to push you. It's more than just some words. There's a driving kind of force behind it. You believe in God. It's more than just saying it. It's more than me just yelling it. But it's like you do something with your actions. You take those steps. Obedience. You follow God. He has this word here. I hear people all the time saying, I don't know what God wants me to do. And it's like we've got this enormous book here, and we don't even know half of what it says sometimes. And it's in here. He tells us what he wants us to do. So it's trusting him. But let's look at this verse. This is in Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. Because what is faith? Where does faith come from? And I think this is important for us to see. Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. It says, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this not from yourselves. It's a gift of God. Not by works, so that no one could boast. So I think that's important. And if anything, it really kind of crushes our pride. As if we did anything. As if any of us can come up here and be like, we stand before God one day and be like, I deserve to be here because I've done all this, because I am strong, I have strong faith, and I'm better than all these other people. This should crush all of our pride. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. I'm not trying to just make us feel like terrible people, but I mean, honestly, like there should be no place for pride in any of this. God said that we have no place to boast about any of this. He gave us, now follow me with this, he gave us the ability to be able to have faith. He gave us all of that. Now we have to exercise it. We have to come to him in faith, but he gave us the ability to do any of this stuff. So there's no way we can even, it's like somebody gives you a gift, somebody gives you a present, and you boast about that. Look what I did. And you're like, you put out your hands and you allowed them to put it in there. It's like, you did absolutely nothing. And still that's an imperfect illustration. We have no room to boast about anything. He says, I gave you the ability to be able to have faith, and we exercise that. We have to exercise that and trust and believe in Jesus. But it all comes from him. And so then this faith, it's this active faith, like he allows us to have it, and we got to take that step and follow him, and take the step, see what he says, what he wants us to do, and start following him in obedience. That's where the change happens. It's not your empty words. It's not just saying you agree with something. It's not just agreeing with the statement that there is a God out there. It's like you got to go further with that in faith and start to follow him. That's important for us. Saving faith doesn't just ascend to a higher power. I said that last week. But it pushes you, it drives you to follow him in obedience. And it talks about in there, it believes that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. There's all kinds of things in there. Like I said, we got to rake in there. We got to get our shovels and dig. I don't know what I'm saying there. We got to find those diamonds in there. It's important for us to kind of read deeply into this and see exactly what he's saying there. We see Enoch. We see this guy who walked with God for 300 years. I just can't imagine that. What an amazing picture. He walked with God for 300 years. Pleasing God, you can write this down too. Pleasing God is having faith in him. I know I'm saying these kind of around the same way, but I want you to understand this. It's not all these works. It's not all these things you do. It's not how much money you have. It's not your abilities and all that stuff. None of that. None of that is what gets us there. We've been given everything from God. He just wants us just to trust in him, just to have faith in him. That active faith that takes a step and follows him in obedience. Pleasing God is having faith in him. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. We got to have that there. And then I believe Hebrews 11:6 at the end kind of tells us, he gives us something because of our faith and trust and obedience. Peter helps us to kind of see this, kind of what he gives us here. Look at 1 Peter. I'm jumping around a lot today, but I want us to kind of get this down. Faith. This is such a deep topic. There's so much in there. But look at 1 Peter chapter 1, 7 and 9 with me. He said, these have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though you've not seen him, you love him, and even though you don't see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy, for you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your soul. So Peter's writing to these early believers. They're going through persecution, and he says nobody ever met Jesus. This group, this is possible. It could be like second generation Christians. So he's writing to people that are going through tremendous persecution, and they've never met Jesus, and they're going through a whole lot. And he's talking to them about their faith being tested, and it's being refined. And guys, I'll just be honest. I say this a lot. It's like when you are a Christian, when you're truly following him, Jesus said you're going to go through things. Don't run away. There's a lot of people who are tempted when something happens, you want to run away, you want to turn away from him. But this is the place where you actually grow. When you actually go through stuff, your faith is tested to show you if you're actually really following him. And we grow through those things. That's what's hard. I know. I talk to people all the time, and I look at my life all the time. In the middle of those things, it's tough. It hurts. It's painful. I don't like those. It's like you're always looking for getting out on the other side. But here's the thing is going through those things. That's what tests us. That's what brings us out stronger. And I think he's talking to these people through all this time. So we don't need to arrange our life to where there's absolutely no test in our life. Because to me, that's almost like you have no faith. If you don't want to trust God. Look, if you don't want to have any kind of trials, anything in life, just don't do anything that he says in here. Just go live your life. And it may be easier in that way. You're not going to be tested. You're not going to go through things. But you're not going to grow. And I would even challenge, are you even living for God if you don't even follow what he says in here? So going through things is essential. It draws us closer to him. Sometimes it strips away things that God says, you may want that. It may be helpful to you. You may like that. But this is hindering our relationship. I don't want to tear these things out of the way so that you see me more. And that's a better place for us to be. Anyway, that's where these guys are. That's what's happening. They're going through things about 30 years after Christ. And he speaks about this reward that they receive. He says, even though you haven't seen him, you love him. And even though you don't see him now, like you will, and it's the same thing with us. Even though you don't see him now, you believe in him. And here's the part, kind of the huge rewards that we receive. It says, you're filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy, for you're receiving the end result of your faith. And then kind of the excitement builds to the crescendo, and it's like the salvation of your souls. And that's what he's saying, the reward. So really, this is what I believe we get so wrong in our day and time, many times in church, is we want to have the rewards now. You know, we're going to have all this stuff now. We're going to have all the great things now. We want to have our 4th private jet for $54 million. Anyway, I could go off on that. You know, it's like we want to have everything now, and it's like this world, this is what it's all about. I got to have everything now. And if God's not giving me everything now, then he's not blessing me, and this isn't what life is all about. And he's like, no. You're going to go through things in this life. Jesus went around and he talked to people, and he's like, you guys want to follow me? He's like, foxes have holes, birds have nests. He's like, the Son of Man doesn't have a place to lay his head. You guys still want to follow me? I don't see anywhere where Jesus is like, I'm living rich, I have all this stuff, and he's like, this is going to be tough. You're going to follow me. This world may be tough. You may go through things. This isn't what it's all about. This is not the reward. This world is broken. This is what we go through. We're here, and as a church now, we need to come together, worship him, and then go tell the world. Make disciples. We need to go out there and reach, like bring a light into the dark place. You know what I'm saying? Like this world is temporary. He never promised it was going to be perfect here. It's later on. So I want to encourage you with that. Just remember, this life is going to be broken. There's going to be things going on here. But this is temporary until heaven. He says, hang on there. I'm there with you. I'm walking through you with this all the time. I'm making you stronger. I'm doing all these things. But this is not the reward. The promised reward is later on. I want to encourage you with that, because I think we miss that in our minds. I think we go through this life. I may not go through the struggles you do. I'm not even going to pretend like I know that. But I want to encourage you, like, this isn't all there is. If things are broken now, if things aren't perfect now, this is not all there is. Jesus said it's later on. Heaven is still there. It's waiting for us. And I think that's a promise we think about, the salvation of our souls. It says you are receiving, and this is kind of a cool part about this, is like it's the present participle. You know, salvation is present and future. And here's what I mean by that. It's like you trust in Christ, we're saved. You're saved now. But just like I was saying a second ago, is like, this isn't all there is. You know, if you come to Christ and you're here and you're like, man, I thought heaven was going to be greater than this. It's like, this is not heaven. This is the broken world. That's later on. So it's like, it's present. You know, we are saved. We trust in him. But it's like later on, full salvation. Look, we're still struggling with things. I'm a Christian. I still have temptation. I still struggle. I'm broken. I would say I cry. I'm not a crier or anything. But it's like, you know, we have all those things. Like we have pain, we have suffering, we have loss, we have sin in this world. That will not be later on. That is later on. That is still futuristic. That is still what we're looking for. That's kind of the unseen that we're still trusting for. Out of faith, like I said, this faith that drives us, that drives us to action. We have faith in the unseen that is coming later on. And we take the steps in obedience, following God in confidence, trust that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And that's what I'm saying. That type of faith, it gives you this foundation. I used a building illustration last week of, you see the building, and there's the foundation that has to be solid for this building to be there. If it's not, if it's on shaky ground, if it's terrible, this huge skyscraper will not be able to stand there. And so you have the evidence of this strong foundation there in this big building there. But if it's not there, if you don't have that foundation, just like in our faith, there's no driving force. Like this foundation in your life of true belief and trusting in God, it comes out in this visible world. And that's what I'm saying. That's what faith is. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. What is this? It's what he gives us, but we can exercise it and follow him. And I just tell you guys, it's more than just believing that there is a God. That's step one, like I said, but it's taking that next step and following him in obedience and trust. And it's painful sometimes, and it's hard to go through some of these things. And sometimes we got to look at our life and change some things around, and it's difficult those times. But I'm telling you, if you do that, if you start following him in obedience and just trust and follow him in faith, trusting that this unseen stuff that he's talking about, this unseen God, we're going to see him one day. Like that is truth. That is going to be a reality. We're going to see that. And I would argue that the unseen, we see God in his perfection that he's creating for us, is more real than what you and I see even now. And I'm going to end with this here. I'm going to look at Joshua chapter 24. I don't have it up on the screen, but I was reading this week, Joshua 24, because this is something that you see we'll put on plaques, we'll put it up on our walls, and I'm sure you guys maybe even have this, but it's Joshua 24:15. It says, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." You know, what a great passage. We see that, but I think a lot of times we just have it as a decoration. It's just there, and I'm not really sure, just in the context of really what was happening, that's what's on our mind. We just kind of say it, and it's just almost saying words, like I believe in God. But really the picture of this, he says this, and then you just go on and read a little bit further. The people are like, yeah, we're going to do that. Who would we serve? Anyone else than God? And he just goes further, and he's like, no, look, you can't just do this. Like, you can't just say this with the words. You have to truly mean this. And he goes deep into them, saying, you got to do this. You got to truly mean this in following God. And I just want to kind of push you guys with that. I think that's such an important thing that we got to get together. We can have a shallow belief in God. We can just say, I believe that he exists, and just go about our life, and maybe you'll do okay in society. Maybe do okay out here, and maybe even just come to church and stuff like that. I'm scared in so many ways for people that make shallow commitments like that. That just say, I believe in God, I'm okay with coming here, putting that up on the wall, and it really doesn't change me, but I really like what it's saying. Yeah, we're with God, with the big guy. But when you get put in those moments of testing, and it may not even be that deep, and you get in those moments of testing, and you quickly fall away, there's passages in the Bible that shows that, and he gives us illustrations. Jesus was clear, and he's like, look, this is what happens to people like that. When something quickly just happens in life, they turn away because they're like, I didn't expect this to happen. Is that real faith? And I would say, I don't think that it is. And I know that this is kind of like with Jesus when he turned around to the crowds and he was like, I'm going to tell you guys fully what this means. And he just boldly proclaimed the truth to them. And some of them did turn away and they're like, this is too hard. I can't get away from trying to give you guys like the truth of that. I want you guys to get it. I want lots of people here, but it's the same way. It's like I'm just compelled. I feel like I have to put that out there. You cannot just have a shallow faith. And if you're there, if you're searching it, you're okay. I want everybody to come here. I want people to even come in here who don't even believe in God. That's awesome. I wish they could come in here. We could fill this place up with people like that. But it's like, you know what? I want you to understand that you can't just have this shallow, like, mental assent that there is a God out there. You have to truly believe in him. You have to take that step of faith, and it has to move you. You have to truly die to yourselves. I mean, it's extreme stuff that he's talking about there. And I don't want you guys to ever leave out of here without really knowing that it's extreme. He's asking for your whole life. But look, guys, this isn't all there is. He's saying you guys are putting all of your faith and trust in what you see right now, and this stuff is temporary. This isn't what there is. This is temporary. I've got something way bigger planned for you, and I want you guys to put your sights past this. And I just want to throw that to you guys. Make that full commitment to God. Trust and fully in him. Give your full life to him. Take that step of faith, true faith. Die to yourselves. Remove all the junk in your life that doesn't need to be there, that's distracting you from him. And I just want to encourage you guys with that.